Okay, friends, the AI frenzy is upon us. ChatGPT and other AI tools have sparked enthusiasm and alarm, and the potential for generative AI to disrupt about every facet of our lives, including global dev, is here. So whether you think we are headed towards a Star Trek future or one closer to SkyNet, there is one area where AI is having a positive impact, and that is in near real-time pictures and images of the health of our Earth. So today, this keynote is really about connecting the dots between geospatial tech and artificial intelligence for good. Now, those of you who know me know I spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn, and I gotta say, Carrie and Juan, you two have some of the coolest titles of anybody working in global development and tech. Juan, you are the VP and Chief Data Scientist and Lab Director of the Microsoft AI for Good Lab, and Carrie, you are USAID's Chief Geographer and GeoCenter Director. So Carrie, I'm going to start with you. What the heck does the Chief Geographer at USAID do?
Well, I have to say it's a pretty cool job as well, in addition to being a cool title. So as a Chief Geographer at USAID, and the director of our GeoCenter, I get to lead a very high-performing team of geographers, data analysts, and remote sensing specialists. And our primary purpose is to bring geospatial insights to bear and share that with our colleagues who work at USAID, both in our Washington headquarters and in our field offices all around the world. And with those insights, we like to inform the development decisions that are being made by our colleagues in all the sectors and all the geographies in which USAID works.
That's great. Thanks for that, Carrie. Now over to you, Juan. What about you, the VP, the Chief Data Scientist and Lab Director of the Microsoft AI for Good Lab? Tell us more about that job.
It's definitely a long title, but yeah, similar to what Carrie mentioned, I'm very thankful for the work we're doing. My job is to lead our AI for Good team. Our objective and our mission is to empower organizations around the world that are trying to help. And what we bring to the table is our AI and data science capabilities. So we partner with multiple organizations where there are projects that require data science and AI, and basically what we bring to the table is that aspect. We always partner with subject matter experts. We have a big geospatial department. That's one of the areas of focus for us, and the reason why it's an area of focus is because we realized very early on when we created the AI for Good that there is a huge power in bringing AI and geospatial data combined. And these can solve and help multiple problems, including a lot of humanitarian problems. We've been working in areas like Ukraine or Turkey, now with the earthquake. And what our contribution, again, is the AI and data science aspect for this project. So I'm very thankful for Microsoft, and I'm very thankful for being able to help address some of these issues.
That's great, Juan. So maybe we can go a bit deeper. Because we are talking about geospatial tech and data, I think it'd be great to talk some specific examples of how Microsoft is in fact pushing the envelope in developing and applying AI and ML to help solve some global development challenges. So what do you have for us?
So I can tell you a little bit about some of the last projects that we're working in this area. Like I mentioned briefly, when the earthquake in Turkey and Syria happened, we engaged with multiple organizations that needed data. We have a very strong partnership with Planet Labs, and they brought the geospatial data. This is high-resolution geospatial data. And we had like before and after data from these events. And our job was to use AI technology to help map every single building that was destroyed or affected by the earthquake. And then we created very detailed maps of all of these buildings. We cross-referenced this data with the population mapping data, and we're able to find map every one of these buildings and do assessment on how many people were affected by these. Then we created these maps, and we share this map with multiple organizations that were working on the ground and that were working like from WFO to the UN Secretary General's office to multiple other organizations that needed this data. And that this is something that we do in now all major problems. We're working even in the US with American Red Cross. We're working overseas with multiple of these organizations. And this helps people on the ground, helps decision makers, helps organizations like UNHCR make decisions. And that's basically what we bring to the table. In a very different area is a project that we're doing that is called Global Renewals Watch. This is something that we've been doing with Nature Conservancy Group and also Planet Labs, where our job is to map every single solar farm and wind farm around the world. We know from a climate change and climate impact point of view that a rapid movement away from fossil fuels is extremely needed. And there has been a lot of investment in solar farms and wind farms around the world, but part of what we want is to make sure that we understand and track progress. In order for understand whether we are making progress, we need to track progress. And this is for the first time that we will be doing this at the global level. We have AI models running across the entire world. This is something that is definitely a lot of work. If a human was going to do this, would take 400 years to do this work. So this is the type of something that AI is not only a solution to the problem, but it's actually the only solution we have. So very, very happy to do this type of projects. Thank you.
Juan, that's great. So it's incredible to hear that you're both working on such a breadth of topics, from the humanitarian response to the renewable energy space. And we're going to go deeper and hear more as we go here. But Carrie, I want to turn it over to you. So Carrie, we know that USAID has been a leader in digital development. They've been instrumentally involved in delivering this conference and so many other events and experiences throughout the sector. But it's true that it's not really a place where we are developing and deploying emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. The agency is not known for that. So how would you say USAID is pushing the envelope in terms of applying geospatial data and technology? What are some examples that you're really excited about in your work?
Sure. Well, we may not yet be pushing the envelope in applying AI. That may be coming in the future. What we have been doing is being a real pioneer in the application of geospatial data, technology, and analyses for international development and humanitarian response. So the GeoCenter that I mentioned earlier that I lead has been working for more than 10 years now to pioneer the use of geospatial information and ensure that it is part of a pipeline of data use, from data collection and cleaning and structuring so that it can be analyzed, to visualizing it, to presenting it and communicating it ultimately to our colleagues all around the world within USAID to make better informed decisions. So that whole pipeline is major steps along the way, but USAID also produces data. So as an example that I'd like to show, the first slide here is giving you a sense, some of the work that we have done in East Africa and Kenya began with better understanding where are the people. We used satellite information and population density information over a period of 20 years to better understand where are the people that we are working with and working to serve as part of the long-term strategic planning exercise that our field mission went through. And once we had a sense about where people were, and you may want to focus in on the darker color right around the Lake Victoria region, where USAID does have a presence in this area. One of the longer term efforts that we engaged in, and you can bring up the next slide, was to bring multiple data sets together to include the satellite imagery to include demographic and health survey, so household survey information, understanding of where household shocks had been experienced, understanding what the budget at the county level in the country of Kenya across 12 different sectors for all of the counties in the country, understanding where conflicts have occurred, combining that, of course, with where we were already working and investing in the various sectors in the country. This was a lot of data to consume, to analyze, to visualize, to make sense of. We had to clean it up. It wasn't in machine readable format when we got much of it. So that took a lot of time. But the innovation here for us is, how do we make that information usable and actionable for our colleagues? What you're looking at here is a geofocusing workshop that we hold at the end of the data gathering and the analysis and the visualization. And you may see lots of maps. They're old-fashioned paper maps on the tables. They're taped to the walls. We made a map booklet that represented so many different data sets, literacy levels, this poverty levels, this kind of thing. And then we bring all the experts in the room together, our experts in environment and climate change, our experts in gender, our experts in education, all those that are represented in the mission. And we're looking at the data at the same time in the form of the maps and graphics. And this helps the experts better understand what the trends are going on in the country. It helps them all discuss the reasons behind why. Why might we see these trends? As the Geocenter and the data analyst, we are not always looking for causality in the analysis that we do, but we bring the visualizations to our colleagues who can better understand and explain what may be happening. And the key piece here is that once it's better understood and discussed at length with the experts, they can incorporate that into our strategic planning and the design of our programs and the monitoring and the evaluation of our programs that are already happening and that will be happening in the field. It helps us target where the need is the greatest and where we should be working in the future. Another example, next slide, of the kinds of innovations that we are investing in is a program called Youth Mappers. And this we started about 8 years ago. And the idea was to create new geospatial data in the places that were undermapped where USAID works, but where we did need to have better information. Along the way, when we started with about 3 universities, we've now collected more than 368 university chapters that are part of this program across 72 countries. The students in university level are learning basic digital mapping skills. They use their skills to solve local issues in their own communities, as well as international and global issues. So what you're seeing here is an image of students who are in the classroom with their laptops, and they are using the backdrop of high-resolution satellite imagery on a platform called OpenStreetMap. They map features on the ground that we know we need to have mapped. You can see a before and an after their work. And then we also validate in the field itself, because from space, we can't always know what kind of building is being mapped for sure, and we do have to validate on the ground. So the students now have learned skills. They get opportunities to connect with each other virtually with thousands upon thousands of students who have gone through this program and who will mobilize sometimes on their very own to use their skills to respond to international disasters once they've learned these skills. We also have recognized that they become leaders in their own community. Once they're empowered with the tools to make a difference, to help put communities on a map that may never have had a voice before, there are real opportunities to gain some leadership skills. So this next slide will give you a sense of all the various places in the world that have been mapped as of the end of February of this year by our many thousands of youth mappers. And the yellow circle is highlighting Syria and Turkey, where the earthquake hit. And that is also a place that students were using their human ingenuity to map damages after the earthquake, as well as prior to the earthquake, with access to the satellite imagery before the damages happened. So this information is made available to the public. It's made available to humanitarian response teams, and of course, contributes to the collective good of knowledge about what's happening in our world. To date, we have created through the Youth Mappers program actually more than 19 million edits to the OpenStreetMap platform, and that number will continue to grow. Thanks.
So Carrie, I love the example of the East Africa Livelihoods Mapping Workshop, converting data to action. And personally, a big fan of Youth Mappers. We've supported some courses and trainings over the years through Tech Change to help Youth Mappers. So great to see that in action. Juan, I'm going to come back to you. So Juan, we heard just the breadth again of the work that the AI for Good Lab is doing, covering environment, humanitarian issues, accessibility, health, cultural heritage. Impressive. So my question for you is, how do you ensure that the data and the analysis your team is providing is truly empowering the organizations and effectively being applied to have real impact on the ground?
Thank you. Great question. I think it's like, for us, when we evaluate projects, we of course, our first step is to evaluate the projects in related to impact. But once we have the impact, once we identify that this is an area of impact, we certainly need to have the right counterpart, and that requires organizations that have the subject matter expertise of the problem that we're solving. But more important, organizations that can, once we use and create this technology, we can do the knowledge transfer to them. So all the technology we do, everything we do is open source. We publish with them, but like you mentioned, our team is measured not necessarily in publications, but more on real world impact. So for us, having the right partner and identifying the right partner is key. That's basically how we do it. And once we finish a project, we work with them to do the knowledge transfer so they can start doing the same thing we did moving forward.
That's great. So what I heard was, keeping things open source, focusing on that real world impact, having the right partners is really essential so that you can do that knowledge transfer effectively. I guess maybe a similar question for you, Carrie. Your challenge, it seems to be, is to really take complex geospatial analysis and put it in front of decision makers at USAID. How do you make sure that what you're doing is useful for those folks who have to ultimately make decisions around funding and programs?
Yeah, another fantastic question. What we find within USAID, of course, this geospatial field, the technology, digital data field, AI, machine learning, it's just evolving so rapidly. So we try, and my team, of course, to keep up with that. But what's really most important is, how do we filter out those data sets and those technologies and applications that are going to be most relevant to the kinds of decisions that our colleagues around the world are needing to make. And it is probably the hardest part of our work in that entire pipeline that I described initially. It's getting the right information in an intuitive form at the right time that a decision maker needs it. And that's a lot of social science to better understand. And it's not one kind of decision that's made rote. We have thousands of decisions that are being made every day around the world in USAID, and they're not all the same. So what my team is continually iterating on and working to improve is how we communicate, how we convey our geospatial insights. I showed you one example with the geofocusing workshop. One thing we found is, no matter how much the technology advances, we still have to invest in the human component of building the trust and the relationships with our colleagues to try a new way or an additional way of informing their existing expertise. We can also take some of these insights in the form of maps and visualizations to stakeholders in local communities. And that helps facilitate for USAID staff in the field, in our field missions, a direct dialogue with local community members to make sure that the data that we're looking at actually is representative of their lived experience. But one of the greatest areas that we focus on truly is never forgetting that we have to eventually communicate in a really effective way. And for some, that might be a paper map, believe it or not. For others, it may be the form of a graph. For others, it may be a presentation. For others, it could be an actual hands-on interactive workshop like I showed the photo of earlier. With the students that we work with youth mappers, they're already digital natives. And so they come into the learning experience with great familiarity and eager attention. And they offer the skills that they learn, and they're working to do things as diverse as help to prevent malaria with the kind of data they're collecting in the field about where people's homes are. They worked at length during the COVID-19 pandemic when it first started to identify hotspots, as well as map health facilities all around the world, topping nearly 1 million health facilities. Also working to identify crops in the field so that can feed into machine learning to better help our colleagues focused on our Foreign Ag Service and our Department of Agriculture better identify smallholder farms and the crops that are growing from satellite imagery. So the whole idea here is being able to communicate effectively the data that we're creating, the data that we're analyzing, and what it really means. So we continue to interact and invest in people and their ability to consume this information and to build their confidence to continue to move forward as the technology evolves.
That's great, Carrie. And I know there's a lot of love for youth mappers in our comments section. So just passing that on to you. So I'm going to invite folks who are watching live to go ahead and ask a question. We'll see if we can get to a couple here in the comments. And I'm going to start with one. There's a question that came in from a colleague who works at IREX, who works on digital development, Jesus. And he's curious if you are working, I'm sure you are, on Microsoft AI governance, particularly how to support staff and partners putting AI principles into practice. I think this is a topic on a lot of people's minds with the rapid pace of this technology. How are we putting safeguards and considerations in place such that we really are doing more good than harm? So Juan, over to you for anything you might be able or willing to share with us on this topic of principles of responsible AI practice.
Yeah, this is something that is really important for us and really important for Microsoft, of course. Microsoft has an Office of Responsible AI. Natasha Crampton is our colleague, is my colleague, and is our Chief Responsible AI Officer. And I work very closely with her. What we do is every project we have go through an Office of Responsible AI review, where we need to make sure that we are following our own guidelines from an ethics and practice use perspective. So yes, Microsoft has an Office of Responsible AI, and we work very closely with that office.
That's great to hear, Juan. So Carrie, I might come to another question from the audience from Whitney here for you. And this is interesting. Maybe if there's a specific example you can think of, but are there examples where you've seen tensions or conflicts between big data coming at us geospatially and small on the ground data around people's lived realities? Maybe there's something from that Livelihoods project where there were tensions. How do you actually navigate conflicting viewpoints or differences in what the data is telling us?
That's great. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily conflicts there, but we do expect to see some differences, mainly because of the time lag. Currently, and this is in a non-AI environment, the data that we use has a time lag from when it's collected and cleaned and published and when we get our hands on it to analyze it and generate insights, which is why we believe it's extremely important to cross-check that with people on the ground and ensuring that, for example, a household survey data set that may have been generated a year or two prior, by the time we get there to the field, it may, as I said, a couple of years may have gone by the time we've had a chance to look at this and compare this to what people are saying. So we consider both as inputs and valuable sources of information, because when we speak to people on the ground, they can give us much greater depth about their experience and whether or not this larger data set or some of the the insights we've gleaned is representative. But we're also looking at a scale that may be different from someone in a particular community. But we're always having to reconcile. And certainly when we're looking at a satellite image of the ground, which can, in today's world of high resolution imagery, that's a lot of big data, big files to move around and process. You can only glean so much before you really have to go to the ground, check it out for yourself, as well as talk with people to ensure that we're interpreting it as best as possible.
That's great to hear, Carrie. So it sounds like they are additive and complementary, not necessarily in conflict in your experience. So I want to close with a question for both of you, and I'll give you kind of 2 minutes each to answer. I think both of your teams, I would say, are small but mighty, right? There's really an incredible amount of talent that you've both got, but these are not large teams, and there's no shortage of global challenges or organizations that need this type of tech and analysis. So when you think about the future, how are you thinking about scaling your teams, your talent, and the use of geospatial data and technologies to do more good for more people, given that the stakes are pretty high with all these challenges really coming to a fore, climate change and so forth? Maybe I'll start with you, Juan.
So I fully agree on that. We cannot scale to the level of problems that the world has. So what we do is to make sure that first we prioritize projects that are not going to help only one organization, but multiple organizations. And second, like I mentioned before, we open source as much as possible all the code, all the models, very well documented. And we also try to, in many cases, when possible, we try to open source the data. So other organizations and other people can actually learn how to solve these problems. And that has been really effective, particularly in the area of open. Whenever we have we can open up data sets, we see that there is a lot of ramifications on the impact where you have multiple teams using that. The same with the models. We publish everything. We peer review and publish everything to make sure that what we're doing is correct and right. And yes, we as when possible we try to help others do the knowledge transfer so they can become autonomous. Yes.
Okay, fantastic one. What about you, Carrie? How are you thinking about taking your small but mighty unit and really scaling your impact, your use of geospatial data, and more?
Sure. Well, actually, I have this dream that taking it beyond the cell phone that now everybody holds in their pockets and seems to be glued to, I would love to have something like a chat GPT, where you can actually query with your voice the map and ask it not just to tell you where you need to go, but tell us questions like, how far are the children who we're building a school for going to have to walk to get there? What's the full area? These are simple questions that we usually query a spatial database to better understand. Or how far is a town from the river that it needs to cross to get to the main marketplace? Or how far does one community have to go to get to a nearby road to take their goods to the market? These are spatial questions that take us a long time to answer because we have to collect the data, clean the data, analyze the data. If we could use AI to do all that collecting and cleaning and getting it into, putting itself into machine readable format in the first place, and then we use humans to ask the more interesting questions of how do we know the questions we need to answer so we can make better decisions, but I'd rather use our human minds on the insights that can come from this and having that feed into the decision-making process and really cutting down on the whole data processing effort. So I'm really looking forward to AI for good in that regard, because I think it will put the geospatial mindset, the geographic approach to development into everybody's hands versus just those of us who seem to use it on a daily basis to inform our colleagues, but give that to the masses.
I love that. What a great note to end on. ChatGPT sounds like one, you and your colleagues should be working on that, or maybe already are. But a good point.
Unfortunately, I don't think we have time, but I can share later on the link. So we presented with at Planet Explorer what we call Queryable Earth, where we integrate GPT in technology with geospatial data to answer some of the questions, the type of questions in natural language, and actually get answers. So we make people more efficient, and you don't need a degree, a PhD in computer science to be able to answer some of these questions. That's what we are. That's the objective. So I'll share the link, Carrie. I'll send it to you and everybody, so you can take a look at the presentation that we did.
I love it. So there you go, Carrie. But listen, highly encourage folks who are watching live or the recorded version to follow up. Sounds like both of you have information, websites with further exploration and case studies and ways to get involved. So just wanted to thank Carrie, you and Juan for joining us today and having a really dynamic conversation. And then for those of you who joined us live and in the chat, if we didn't get to your questions, I think we'll find other ways to follow up. But thank you for coming, attending, and engaging. We're thrilled to have you involved. So thanks, everybody. Signing off.
Thank you, everyone.